Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Logan Fullmer. Over the last 10 years, Logan Fullmer has run a successful real estate business that began with buying foreclosures and flipping single-family homes. His non-traditional deals include curative title work, rezoning, subdividing, dispute resolution, undivided interest transactions, trustee services, and construction. Before real estate, he managed oil and gas and construction projects in southern Texas. Currently, he is the director and managing partner of his company, Asset Resolution Partners, where he manages the business and the transaction and litigation management of its deals. He is an expert in fixing title problems, a master in finding solutions for dirty deeds, and a successful investor who unlocks value through solving problems. He is also the owner of an impressive historical Gibbs home and a father who applies his real estate investing knowledge in his kids' education. Logan, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Kendall, great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we are so excited to have you. I've been wanting you to be a guest on this show for quite some time, and so I'm so glad that we finally were able to get the calendars lined up and synced up.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right in. How did you get started in doing land deals?
I was in the oil field and I don't talk about this a ton. It's technically the real start that I had as a family member needed a little bit of management on some assets they had. So I worked for them, bought them some rent houses, managing, it was their money. I did that for a little while and learned that I didn't really love rent houses a ton at the moment. And I realized unless you had a lot of cash, your returns weren't going to be really great. So I go out to the oil field and I'm working and I'm trying to decide how I'm going to get into real estate myself. And I spent time in Austin and Houston. I watched East Austin develop about 10, 15 years ago. Then I also watched parts of Houston that went from really just poor neighborhoods in terms of building condition, quality, occupancy, all that kind of stuff. And they turned around real quickly. So I got to watch those dynamics. And I was coming to San Antonio on the weekends, maybe every couple of weekends when I get a break from work. And I started to realize there was an area, the east side of San Antonio, that was just over the highway. And you had high value in the central business district, but you jump the highway and it just, these lots are worth $3 to $5 grand. The houses are 20 grand, super low value. So I started buying those over time. I was working in the oil field and coming back to San Antonio every couple of weeks and knocking on doors, buying a lot, maybe buying a little house. And that was a really meaningful time in my life because I was really getting started. I spent time in the oil field working and saving money. And I used no debt at the time, it was just cash. And the biggest thing that I was really scared about happening was me making a mistake and losing the money. Because several years, about 5 or 6 years before I went to Oilfield, I inherited a bunch of money, like a lot. But I was really poor with money. I wasn't in a good place in my life. I wasn't very mature growing up, and I burned hundreds of thousands of dollars a year quickly. I spent an entire fortune that I inherited in a very short amount of time.
Wow.
And I realized how hard it is to make money at that point and how quickly it used to go. And I thought, holy shit, it's going to take a lifetime to do this. So my big focus was not losing money and possibly making money. When I saw these vacant lots between $3,000 and $5,000 a piece, I recall thinking they can't really be worth much less. And if I screw up and invest in this stuff and they never go up in value, I'll probably be able to sell them and get my money back or most of it. Because what are they going to go down to $0 in value? Probably not from $3 grand. But if it goes up, I saw Houston and Austin explode in value. And I thought my upside could be multiples. My downside is very low risk. So that was when my entry point into real estate really started as a principal, as an investor. And I really went after it at that point.
Yeah, that's really good. So, how did you learn? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a coach? Did you go through some courses?
Yeah,
What did it
no.
look like?
So if you think back, that was about 10 or so years ago. We didn't have quite so much. That's when the guys that are known as like the grandfathers of real estate investing have only been on YouTube for 10 years. That's about the time they're getting their start. So today you go in and you can find everything on Google or YouTube. Back then it wasn't quite like that. And I just thought, what do? I got some money. Let me find these properties. So get on the appraisal district, find the address, and go knock on the door and ask folks if they would sell. It was really that simple. No technology. I was using my cell phone and printed out contracts that look just like this, the promulgated forms. It's a very basic, non-scalable, just very unsophisticated approach.
I love about that so much is it's just the action. It's just like jumping in and saying, I may not know what the 19 step looks like, but I'm just going to go in and figure it out.
I'll tell you, that's when I coach folks a lot. I do some coaching here and there, and that's the biggest issue. Is I tell folks, man, you can pay for all the coaching you want, but if you don't go out there and get to work, none of this matters. And that was the biggest thing. I didn't know anything except for I can buy that lot for $5,000. I hope this works. It was the most basic concept in the world, but the action behind it's what really made stuff work.
Yeah, that's so good. I've heard it said that oftentimes a problem isn't information, it's implementation, right? So like you can have all the information in the world, but if you don't implement it, what?
Yeah.
So, what types of land deals do you specialize in now?
A lot, actually. I don't know that I would really say the type of purchase, the acquisition model is more of the specialty. And after that, what I'm going to do with it varies. And if I don't know what I'm going to do, I'll just find an expert because I've got the resources, I've got the time at this point. So I'll find an expert to do it and just cut them in. So I could probably do any kind of land deal that there is, but let me back up and tell you when I was buying that land in the beginning, early on, what I just told you about when I got started, I picked up a couple dozen vacant lots, one after the other. I spent about 300,000 buying all those lots. And I started getting offers from realtors several years later, and I got lucky and I bought at the right time. The values are going up quickly. And I remember getting offers for a couple $100,000 a piece. And I'm in these lots for 5 or 10 grand at most. And I remember thinking the real estate market's moved a lot. I didn't realize the market had moved so quickly while I wasn't paying attention. But I got to see infill land and how quickly it could change in value. And I would sell to developers and see what was going on. So I was able to sell those lots for anywhere from 50 to 200,000 a piece. And I was all in this whole portfolio for about 300 grand.
Wow.
So it was a hell of a play. That gave me a lot of liquidity, or a fair amount of liquidity, pretty quickly. But at that time, I got to watch these folks develop. I played around a little, did some subdividing of my own in some of the downtown lots. I take a lot and cut it up into 4 pieces and sell it to a builder. And so I got some really interesting experiences that way. And after that, I got to walk out of there with some cash, and then I started to build some credit. And my focus wasn't specifically on land, other than the fact that I found some title problems and I was buying all that land. And as I learned how to solve those, I realized that mattered. But when the market started to move and the value started going up quickly, I couldn't go back to those neighborhoods and buy cheap again. But I remember there were a lot of title problems in those neighborhoods, and I passed on those deals the first round. But now I'm thinking, how do I get a really good deal to buy something for less than it's worth in an inflated market? And that's when I went back and tried to fix some of these title problems. And then I realized, oh shit, I can buy these for 5 or 10,000 a piece still. And the market is up here and we know where it's at now, but I still have this ability to buy really low. That was probably the biggest evolution of the business. And that has stayed true today, 10 years later. That's still probably 50% of my acquisition models looking for those major problems. So the land where you said, what land deals do you specialize in? I won't say my exit strategy or my play is the specialty. The specialty is the acquisition at extreme discounts. That is really it.
Got it. So you are finding these properties that may have title issues, title problems that are almost quote unquote impossible. So that's why the owners still have them. And then that's the distress, right? And so you're buying it at a deep discount because it is so distressed from a title standpoint. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. The most common title problem, you'll see a break in the title chain, which could be like a person passed away and his 5 heirs deeded the property to the next person. And from there, title changed hands several times, but there's never actually a probate. So old man died and 4 deeds were given out of these people that aren't old man. You got to break in that title chain. So you have to solve that. Sometimes the deed won't get recorded, although it'll get signed and handed over. It never makes its way to the land record. So that break in the title chain is a really common problem. There are tons of judgments and liens out there that sometimes can outvalue the property. So that's another issue. You have instruments of record like deeds or affidavit of heirships or other vesting documents that have errors and mistakes in them or omissions, or they're just horribly constructed documents. Those are really common problems. Another really common problem is multiple people own a property and they're fighting. They can't unanimously agree on what to do. While that's really an ownership problem, I categorize under a title problem. Things like that exist, or missing owners. You might have an owner that's gone missing. He's dead or moved to Switzerland or under a bridge somewhere on a bender, like the craziest So those are the big issues that you see a lot.
That's really interesting. It's what I love so much about it is it's almost you're just picking up the stuff that like, I've heard other people. Let me give you a perfect example. So, a few colleagues of mine, whenever we're talking about different deals that we're doing, if they come across a title problem, they're like, "Oh gosh, another one of these. Like, why couldn't it just be easy?" A lot of them like end up passing up on those deals, but you're going after those. And so, how do you go about systemizing that to look for title issues as an acquisition strategy?
There are a couple places that property with problems like that typically show up. And a lot of times you'll find them on the tax foreclosure list. There's no more debt on the property, it's been paid off. And folks will make it work for a while, especially even when you have problems. But eventually, someone says, we got a problem and I'm done paying the taxes. And when enough time elapses, it'll wind up on the tax sale list. So now you have a deadline or it's going to be lost. So you've got some urgency there. So that's one that it usually surfaces on. You can go to the land records and type a couple different things like et al. Or estate of, things like that, depending on your area. And groups of properties that have unresolved estates or multiple owners will pop up just in droves. Another thing that I noticed after talking about doing this, if you didn't really want to do any marketing at all, you could literally call realtors every day and say, did you have any deals that haven't closed in the last 2 years? Would you let me take a crack at them? And when you're dealing in super high value property, it's not so common, but once you get in a little bit land or lower value property, there are problems everywhere. You could literally get free leads from realtors all day long. That's an easy one.
Wow, that's really good. If someone's listening to this and they've only done quote unquote pretty deals where there are
Yeah.
no title issues, but they say, you know what, I think that this sounds like a really good opportunity. You've mentioned where I can go to look for these things. What's the next sort of expectation that they need to have in terms of doing these types of deals successfully?
I would do two things. First thing is I would go find a local lawyer that you like and trust and it's experienced and understands real estate law, property law. I'd go find that guy and just get a relationship with him quickly. After that, I would start on the tax foreclosure list, specifically for Texas. A lot of other states have high property taxes, so you'll find a lot of property popping up on those quickly. But that's an easy list you can go to every single month that has properties are getting ready to be sold. They got problems, they got taxes owed, and at least 3/4 of them have title issues. So it's simple, it's a free list, and you can type in your county tax foreclosure into Google, and you get a list of 20 properties this month.
Wow. All right. And so let's say you find that list. What's the next step? You've got your lawyer in place,
Yep.
you've got the list. What's the next thing that you do? How do you go about contacting the owners? What do you say to the owners?
You're going to need some data program, be it been verified or TLO or one of these. You're going to have to get some data on folks, and you're going to have to get good with Google and ancestry.com, things like that, because a lot of these owners, they're either dead, they're missing, a relative is the owner, but their name is still on title. So you have to do a little bit of research. The person, usually on a tax foreclosure posting, the person of record will be listed, and sometimes the heirs will be listed depending on how good of a job the tax foreclosure attorney did. But you got to get these folks on the phone. And my pitch isn't usually very complicated, but I can tell that there are some issues with this. And if you want to sell it to somebody before the sheriff sells it, I can probably solve any problem that you've got. And they usually go into this talk of, here's the problem. Someone said they could solve it. They could. We've done this, we've done that. And at that point, you have to get over a credibility hurdle.
Got it.
And you may not have that credibility at the moment. But your next piece is, look, I'm willing to pay a lawyer to help us fix this. If you're willing to sell it to me for a fair deal, I'm willing to spend some money to try to fix it.
That's really good. That's really good. So, when you're working through these title issues, you mentioned that you have a lawyer on your staff or on your team, and you also mentioned this earlier that when you first got into land, that you would just find a specialist, even if you didn't know how a certain thing worked, you find a specialist. So I love that kind of who, not how mentality.
Yeah.
What other essential team members would you say that's necessary for someone that's just getting into this outside of the lawyer?
You're not going to have these folks like on retainer when you start. Eventually, you'll either have a relationship with them so you can pay them quickly and get them to work with you. You may end up adding them to your team at some point, but a genealogist is helpful if you want to take on the really complicated ownership issues. A private investigator and an attorney and a surveyor. The two most important are the private investigator and the attorney. Those two are the highest priority. Call them, talk to them, tell them you're going to do some deals. Try to convince them that you're different than all these other idiot investors. The typical person thinks is a stupid investor who's cheap and fucks things up and doesn't solve problems. You have to convince them you're not that guy.
Got it. Yeah, really good. And the model, it seems like it's a pretty straightforward model just in terms of the distress in the title area for these sort of simple flips for these lots. What does it look like in much larger deals? I know that you've spoken about large subdivide deals and really finding value. What does that look like?
So in the beginning, the acquisition model for me needs to have some element of distress. 50 to 75% of the transactions that come in my office have some element of distress. After that, I'm going to decide what to do with it. I'll tell you what those can look like, but let me move forward a little bit. My office, I have 20 people working in my office. I have a handful of sales folks. I've got operations managers, project coordinators, a couple partners here, a transaction coordinator. So I've got like a robust group of people. So this is very systematic. I do several hundred transactions annually as a principal. So we buy it, do something to it, and resell it. I have a little bit of transactions or wholesaling in a commercial wholesaling business, but typically the lead needs to have some amount of distress because I've got to get a really good deal. I don't want to have to do construction and flip my way into a profit margin. I want to buy it for less than it's worth. As long as I can do that, I'm in good shape. But the acquisition model is one kind of front. But once it comes in, me or one of the other partners will look at this deal and say, what do we do with this? Should we just wholesale it? Or does it need to be taken down, purchased, and put on MLS? Or is this a curative project that's going to take a lawsuit to solve the title issue? Oh, excuse me. Texas allergies here. Or is it some kind of land subdivision deal? What's that really need to look like? A really common deal is I'll buy something for 30 or 40, $50,000 and I'll be able to put it on MLS for 2 to 300,000. That's a really common deal. I'll do a lot of those. Somewhat simple title problems. Maybe it's just several owners. I got to collect all their ownership. Maybe it's as small as an affidavit of heirship, or maybe one judgment or one lien that I've got to settle and negotiate to clear title. That's it. Just dump it on MLS. Some of the more exciting ones are the bigger, the curative projects that have lots of issues. You know, I'll be in those on the good ones anywhere from 1 to 200,000, and they'll sell for anywhere from $1 million to $2 million. So you're getting interest in big property, but extreme discounts because there's a real issue there. But once that's clear, those just go straight to MLS too. On the other end of the spectrum, though, I've got a couple hundred unit subdivision right now in just south of Austin. When that's said and done, I'll be able to sell the entitled land with the development agreement with the local municipality. That deal's 100 acres and it'll sell for about $28 million. That's on the high end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that is remarkable. And so the deal that you mentioned earlier about these common buy 30, 40, 50, sell for 100, 200,000,
Yep.
are you finding those owners the same way that you would find an infill lot owner, for example?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the
Wow.
same. One of the reasons that I moved a little bit away from the infill lots is because of value. When I started doing this downtown San Antonio, the lots were 50 to 80 grand. They started to move up to 1 or 200, and that's great. But if you want to do $1 million or $2 million deal, you're not going to get that on a lot of these infill lots. You might go downtown Austin and find that. And I do a fair amount of transactions in downtown Austin. You'll get a third of an acre that's worth, I don't know, 700, 800 grand, $1 million sometimes. So I'll do some of those, but the easier answer is to go to rural land. You can get 50 or 100 acres and get several $1 million in value there. And the same problem that the guy has in a downtown San Antonio lot that's worth 100 grand exists on the rural Atascosa County, Texas lot that's 90 acres worth $1 million.
That's very cool. And so, and again, I just want to clarify how you find these sellers it's pretty much the exact same, right? You're looking at tax foreclosure lists, you're talking to agents, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like you have a whole like spectrum of different types of deals that you go after. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what some of the criteria that you have specifically for these rural land deals that you do? Do you have a size criteria? Do you have, oh, it has to have road frontage? Talk to us through that process.
It's really more about value. I'm looking for something that's got a couple $100,000 worth of spread on the deal. If it's less than that, I don't really want to do it. Now, the ideology about why you need that spread is equally as important. The land can be landlocked and I can have to solve that issue, or it can be down the middle of some tiny little unimproved road that kind of sucks, or it can have good frontage on a highway. I don't know. But I'm really looking for the value. As long as there's a couple $100,000 worth of margin, meaning whatever it's worth, I can pay this amount and there's still this amount in margin. I like the profitability of that. But the part that a lot of folks forget to talk about is I've got all that room to screw things up and miss the mark. I have to overpay for some things. A problem isn't what I thought it was, and it's much more expensive. It might require a lawsuit to solve the title problem. And if I buy it for 50 and it's worth 300, I've got room to screw things up all day long. I have enough room in terms of margin of error that I could build 1,000-foot road from my property across the neighbor's property, buy an easement from him, improve the road, and bring a water line in there and still make a little money because I missed that there was no water, or what looked like an easement was actually a dirt road and it wasn't an easement. I had to get one. I've got all these room to make mistakes. Now, the neat thing is those major mistakes, because we've gotten pretty good, they rarely surface without us knowing. But as long as we enter with the same ideology, every once in a while we screw up and we're still protected, but we have room to get through any mistake and still have great margin. So for me, it's really about a risk level that I've got to cover. And early on, I had a lot less money than I had time. I had a lot of time and not much money. So I was
Right.
willing to spend all this time to fix problems, and I just had a little money. I needed to make that money grow. Now I have more money than time, but I still have to be disciplined on that because those big margins are still there. So you can still grow it. You just have to maintain that discipline level. So at the end of the day, I'm not really looking for anything except for spread.
Hey there, land fans. If you're enjoying this episode and would like to see more episodes like this, please be sure to let us know by liking and subscribing below.
Got it. Really cool. And because you've got so many creative different opportunities out there to add value with the curative title work, it sounds like your funnel can be a lot larger for the types of deals that you bring in. So,
Yeah, the more issues there are, just the less I'm going to pay. Folks say, oh my gosh, there are 30 owners. Great. I'm not giving you 100 grand. I'm going to give you 30. Oh my gosh, this doesn't have highway frontage. It's landlocked. Great. I'm not giving you 400 grand. I'm going to give you 30. You just keep buying your way down. The poorer the quality, the more issues, you just pay less. And if they don't want to sell it, that's fine. There's another one right behind you. It's got the same kind of problems. I'll deal with them instead.
I love it. No, that's a great mindset. That's so good. So let me ask you, there's been a lot of talk about the shifts in the real estate market. Where do you see the market going now, and how does that affect your business model, specifically with curative title, if at all?
I can be another talking head and tell you what I think's happening with the market, and you can flip a coin, and that will be the indicator if I'm right or wrong. I don't know. My brother-in-law works on Wall Street, a hedge fund, and he'll echo the same thing, but you don't really know. But the neat thing is I'm not affected by the market, so I spend a lot less time worrying about it. If the property that I'm working on, I'll give you a project that we're in the middle of right now. I paid 150 all in, 160 range, and it's 1.25 is the market value. It was across 5 tracks in East Texas. It was a tax sale deal from a month and a half ago. On that deal, I'm all in. It's worth 1.2 million. I'm in it for 150. So basically 10 cents on the dollar. Man, I don't really care what the market's doing. I always buy these cheap enough. So in a good market, I'll sell it at 90 to 95 cents on the dollar on MLS. So it sells really quickly. Land normally sells a little bit slower, but when I'm discounting it 10 or 15%, my land will sell faster than everybody else's if they have a lot on the market because I offered a good deal. At this point, I've got some stuff that I've got to sell. The one I just told you about that's worth 1.2, whatever. I'll probably sell. I'm all in. I bet I'll sell for 9 to 950 range. I can give a 20% discount. There's a ton of inventory out there. So of the 5 tracks I bought, I just listed 3 of them on Thursday, and I got a full price offer on Friday. There's land that My realtor tells me that I hired out there. He's an expert out there. He says it's going to take 3 to 4 months to sell this land. And I'm like, great, we'll just sell it for 20% less than it's worth. He's like, what are you talking about? Why would you do that? I'm in it for a chicken scratch. Let's do this. Mine sold in a day. And they gave me a no option cash offer. They'll close in some ridiculous short timeline.
Love
So
it.
what's the market doing? You need to be aware of it, because if you're not, you're stupid. But it doesn't really affect this part of the business. Even when folks say land becomes a slower asset to sell when markets change and financing costs increase like they are right now, and I say, great, I'll just discount a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. No, that goes to the old adage, price fixes everything, right? So if you can be
You know
competitive,
what? An old man used to tell me this: there's no bad product, only bad pricing.
that's good. That's really good. I need that on a poster somewhere. Really good.
Yeah.
So I know that you go after, just if the criteria is that you'll get value, that's where you go. But do you have a rule of thumb for how you pick target markets, or you just find whatever? Or talk to us about that.
When I'm specifically going to market for land that I know has problems, and some of the lead gen guys are going to work on it right now, the way I'll narrow that down specifically is I'll basically say, all right, guys, I'll go for the big MSAs because there's more demand there. I want to be within an hour, maybe around an hour from the big MSA. So Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. But I'll take the county. For example, I'll use Bexar County. Let's X out Bexar County because there's a lot of demand there. Lots of people are farming it. I'm going to hit all the counties that circle. Bexar County's big. So we have like 5 counties, I think it is, that touch Bexar County. So I have 5 delinquent tax lists for Bexar, going to be the adjoining counties. I'll do the same thing for not Travis quite so much because it's pretty damn expensive. There's a lot of attention there in Austin, but I'll go Dallas and I'll go Houston, hit all the counties touching it. That can give me about 15 to 18 counties for those 3 big MSAs. And as long as I'm in a county that adjoins the primary county, there's enough demand there. I'm going to go straight for the delinquent tax list first. And then once we work that, you got about a week. That sale list is issued 21 days prior to the first Tuesday of the month when the sale happens. So about 3 weeks. You've got about a week to get that list, hammer it. Your deal's getting done usually in the first week. And sometimes you'll get it signed 2-3 days before the sale, but there's this big gap in between. So what we'll do then is that's where everybody hits your list, is when the sale list is issued. A lot of folks don't realize tax foreclosures in Texas are judicial foreclosures. Mortgage foreclosures are non-judicial. That's just the power of sale by a trustee and the deed of trust. So trustee will go sell it at the courthouse after doing public notice. When it's a tax sale, the county has to file a lawsuit to get the right to foreclose. It's a judicial foreclosure. You have to have a judge's order to sell. If you go to the docket search for that county, for example, Bexar County, which is ours, and type in the plaintiff search category, Bexar County, Bexar Co. actually, Bexar County doesn't sue very many people, but when they do, it's usually for delinquent taxes. So if you type them in as a plaintiff, you're going to see all the judicial tax foreclosures that have been filed. It takes anywhere from 4 to 12 months for the judge's order to actually happen in that tax lawsuit to get the sale to happen, to get an order of sale. If I go in and see when Bexar County is filing these lawsuits, I'll wait till the citation has been issued and then returned, which means June has been served, or I'm sorry, Kendall has been served for the tax lawsuit to sell his property, and the citation has been returned to the court. That means the only people that know about that tax lawsuit is Kendall and the county that filed it, and anybody that's looking in the land records or the court records. Nobody really goes to look there. So we can get about a 6-month jump on that tax sale list by going there. So there's 2 weeks in between the posting for the sale and the actual sale. We got a little lag time. For those 2 weeks, we'll go look at the docket search and start reaching out to people that have just been served early on in the process.
That's really good. And so once you have a signed purchase agreement with the seller, does that stop any of the foreclosure process, or do you actually have to physically close on it, assume those title issues, and then work on it?
So it depends. Just that contract is not enough. Every once in a while, if you can get your contract, receipt with the title company, and send it in to the tax office and show them proof of funds, maybe 1 out of 10 tax offices will postpone the foreclosure sale. But you got to remember, the county and the tax attorney that they've hired have been through this judicial proceeding for 12 months to get this sale to happen. Dude,
Right.
they want to get it done and get it off their books. So they're not horsing around. So if you don't give them really good proof and make them feel really good that you're going to close, they won't postpone and they'll say, pay us. So then at that point, you're going to have to pay them, or sometimes I'll do what's called a temporary restraining order against the county to prevent them from doing the sale. Or I'm looking at now doing a bill of review, which means you open up the tax foreclosure lawsuit and review it. There are a lot of errors in the tax foreclosure suits. So a bill of review will peel that back and probably get you 6 months while you're reviewing the lawsuit, but it prevents the sale. So now I have time to fix the title issues and close.
Got it. Got it.
Now, in a more advanced way, so I've been doing this a long time, I've gotten better at it. I don't have to do that quite so often now. We'll run our own title abstract here in our office. We'll underwrite it ourselves, and I'll go close on it and get deeds from these folks with the title problems intact, and then I'll pay off the tax lawsuit. That way, I can maneuver through most of this, and I'll go fix it on my own time.
Yeah, that sounds like it gives you a lot more control, at least of the timeline of the deal, if you're able to just assume that those title issues. So, can someone actually do that where they assume the title issues and close on the property if they don't have their own title company, or do they?
So I don't have a title company, but I'm buying the property just without title insurance.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm basically taking my own risk, and the deeds that I get, they're good deeds. They're from owners to me, but there might be a break in the title chain, like a missing probate or an affidavit of heirship. And my contract might say that when I buy the deeds from these folks, I'm only paying them 20% of the purchase price. I'm buying on an installment sale. And their first payment to them is when they give me their deed. But the second payment, which might be 80% of the purchase price, only happens when they finish their affidavit of heirship and file it. So I'm waiting on them to finish. Now I might get an attorney to help them do that, but I'm not paying them until they finish with me.
That's really good. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really good. So, would you just tell the title company, look, I don't want title insurance on this, and they're like, okay, good, let's move forward? Is that?
Well, so title company will not close a transaction without insurance and escrow services offered. So there's no title company that's a part of my transaction. I got folks in my office every once in a while. It's me. We're talking to the sellers. We're cutting a deal. My attorney is drafting our paperwork and sending it to these folks, and they're closing with a mobile notary, and I'm wiring the money and I'm getting the deed. And I have a what's called Simply File. I can e-record deeds through the county clerk, the local county clerk, through my computer program. So I'm e-recording and I'm closing myself with no title company anywhere near this.
Got it. And so that's where your real estate attorney comes into play, right?
So at this point, I've gotten pretty well doing this myself. The attorney's doing the docs and he'll solve problems with this, but I normally project manage the attorneys. Here's how we're going to solve it this time. This is what we're going to do, blah, blah.
Got it. Awesome. And so once you do that self-close and once you fix all the title issues, do you then get title insurance? Do you solve all of those title issues? Is that necessary, or how do you go about doing that?
So I can't just go, or you can't just go to a title company and say, let me buy insurance. The title insurance is to insure a transaction. So I can't walk in and just buy an insurance policy on my land. What'll happen is I'll underwrite it myself and make sure that I've solved all the problems and I believe it's clear to sell. And I'll then call my title company and say, hey, I'm getting ready to sell this property. Can you run me a TBD commitment? And they'll run their title report and they'll send me a commitment just like you would get after a contract is receipted. But in the buyer and seller's name, the seller's name will usually say my name. The buyer's name will say TBD and the price will say TBD. But I'll have a schedule A, B, C, and D, and I'll go straight to the schedule C and make sure it looks clean. And if it does, now I'm going to dump it on MLS and know that when I bring that title to title insurance or to the escrow gal, they'll write a policy on it. I can get this insured when we sell it. So I actually never have insurance, but I buy a policy for them when they sell it.
That's great. Yeah, that's really good stuff. I love it. So whenever you are doing dispositions on your properties, you mentioned listing on the MLS. Do you ever sell for notes? Are you a notes guy? Do you sell on creative financing, or is it just all cash? What are your approaches to that?
When I'm buying, you can't use debt on these deals because you can't get title insurance, and lenders all want lender policies. So without a lender policy, you ain't borrowing. So I do these deals with cash, which means you have to do more balance sheet management and have more retained earnings so you can deploy cash on these. But when it's time to sell, that goes back into this whole, let me take a look at it and see what we want in total. One of the companies inside my office here, that partner loves notes. So we do a lot of 1 acre lots with a mobile home on it, or it's just a couple acre lots. We sell a lot of that stuff on notes. You get a little premium on your sales price. And then of course you get your payment stream with it. Some of them will go, when those happen, I usually don't sell those in MLS, or a couple of local realtors that source those buyers. I just call them and goes right into their channel. The sales that I want to have conventional financing or cash, that's when they'll get listed on MLS usually.
Got it.
But it just depends. A lot of times I step back and look at my business and say, there are 5 sub companies that these deals happen in, and there's a partner that manages that company with each one, and he owns half, and I got the other half. So I step back and look at it and say, okay, these deals came in Ryan's company. Ryan loves notes. He's got enough cash to run the next couple quarters without running out of cash. His credit lines are paid back. He's not drawing down his credit lines. Make some notes out of these. Or I might look at that same situation and say, dang, dude, he's drawn his credit line down by 50%. He's got a fair amount of cash, but he needs to pay this credit line. What's this look like? All right. With his cash account, he's going to take half of it and pay the credit line down to 0. So he's got no more money on the credit line, but his cash, we like to keep it as reserve account, is cut down by half. All right. We have 5 properties inventory. Why don't you sell two of them on notes and sell the other 3 for cash? That way we can re-up the cash account. So it's this balance so that we do balance sheet management and keep the companies healthy.
Yeah, I love that.
A lot of folks really get distracted about, I'm a note maker. You don't have to be a note maker. You can do it when you need to, or you have all these ways to put themselves in a box. But I step back and say, let's focus on balance sheet management. That's the business management part of this, not the deal management part. And we can do some wacky, crazy ass deals, but we can still manage this company like a real solid operating company that has financials that any bank in town will give unsecured credit lines to, because it's very well managed.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, if someone is like listening to this and they're saying, man, this is what's missing in my business, this balance sheet management approach, how did you go about learning your approach to that? And what advice would you give someone as a starting point to learn how to do this?
If you don't understand it naturally, I got lucky. My dad was a CPA, and while he didn't teach me a ton about accounting, I got a knack for numbers from him. So that was nice. My mom was a salesperson, so I got some amount of salesmanship from her. So what I found is it's a really good combination. I've been really lucky and had a lot of inherent wins while building and growing a business, because some of that stuff comes natural. But I'll tell you, if it doesn't, the way to do that is build a relationship with a local accountant, a CPA kind of guy that's really good at real estate, and a super bright guy, a guy that's way brighter than you. Pick that guy. And don't be afraid to pay him. Real estate investors are notorious for being cheap as fuck, and just they cut their nose off to spite their face. They save a penny here, but it costs them $1 over here. Investors are the worst about it. I pay my professionals top. I have the best lawyers that you can find in this county, and I'm talking some high dollar dudes. I've got my business partner is a CPA. He was an $800 an hour guy before he retired from his firm. It's the best advice you can get. And when you spend time with these guys getting guidance, boy, it changes who you are in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
Even if you have to give, let's say you have 2 or 3 crazy deals. I've got attorneys that I've cut in on deals that I didn't necessarily need all their help. I cut them in and gave them pretty damn good shares, and it was done to grease them. And at the end of the day, the guys love me, respect me. They've been involved in deals that they know that I didn't have to cut them in on, but they made good money on me. And you know who I can call on a Saturday night who will answer my phone call if they're at a dinner party with their wife? I can get those guys on the phone that run some of the big firms here in town, and some of their best clients can't get them to answer their call during the weekday. By doing things like that, I have access to some of the best guys out there, but I had to pay for it. It wasn't for nothing.
Sure. It sounds like that is just what I love so much about that is that it's being very strategic and very intentional about how you're growing your business. And it can be really easy, I know, especially just when I was a beginner, changing from doing a few deals here and there to actually making that a business, like that's an entirely different animal.
My
And
God.
so thinking
Yeah.
like a business owner, that's completely different than just doing a few deals.
It is. And there's this tough part. You want to get into real estate, you want to make some money, and you get a couple good deals, and you find yourself in a spot where you just made 50 or 30 or maybe 100 grand on a deal. It is very hard to not want to go and buy some shit, basically.
Yeah.
This is a good example, man. I have basically lived on about $150,000 annual draw up until 2 years ago. For the first 8 years of this business, actually, for the first couple of years, I didn't live on much of anything, 40 grand, 50 grand. And it was basically retaining earnings, reinvesting, growing. And up until about then, I got up to the point where I was drawing about 150 grand a year. And I'm talking making multiple millions in net and paying my taxes and reinvesting everything back into the company. That allowed me to buy an office, not just rent one. That allowed me to hire some great folks and start growing quickly. That allowed banks to look at me like I was very disciplined and open up. Anytime I need debt for a long-term asset, I got it. When I need a credit line, I got millions of dollars in unsecured credit lines because my financials are so disciplined. I finally gotten to the point where I'm living off a little more than 150 grand a year, but the goal is always to stay extremely disciplined. And it's allowed the Golden Goose, that company, to be so strong and grow so well and provide so well. Now at this point, I can kick back and get a little bigger house, buy some fancy shit.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
it's not
tough
just
at the
all,
beginning. That's what you're getting in this because you want to make money. And when you
right.
finally start to get some, you got to do the counterintuitive thing and say, you know what? I'm going to reward what's going to take care of me. It's the business. I'm going to put the money back in there and just take a little for me. And if you take care of the business like that, one day it's really going to start taking care of you, but you got to take care of it and respect it for a long time before it starts doing good for you.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's fantastic advice. Sounds like you do so many of these quote unquote impossible deals, have all of these problems from a title standpoint. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what would you consider to be some of your main deal breakers?
When I'm looking at a deal that's got problems, I'm looking for something that's hard, which means I'm going to get the good deal because you got a problem. But I'm also looking for something that's easy. You need some problems stacked, but they can't be so many. What I have learned is there's no deal that's unsolvable. Every deal is fixable. And it's usually you go down the courthouse, file a lawsuit, and the judge will make a determination. Y'all are splitting the property, or he'll give you an order for title. There's always a solve down the courthouse. But the question is the juice worth the squeeze? I try to get in high enough value and get a low enough purchase price was really worth my time. But where a real deal breaker is the property comes with a whole bunch of problems, but not a big enough discount. At that point, I say, I can fix all this, but it ain't worth it. That's what I'm really looking for. A problem that's big enough for someone to give me a deal on it, but a big enough discount where it's really worth my time to do it.
Yeah, that's good. Comes back to that value, right? Like, is there value in there for you to get a deep enough discount?
Yeah, can I afford to screw up? And if I thought there were 5 owners and I got 5 deeds, and it turns out there's 7, and one of them's lost in, I don't know, Mexico on a Peace Corps journey for a while, and you can't get a hold of them. Can I afford to buy this with cash, sit on it, and not make my business hurt because I'm running out of cash, and maybe take 2, 3, 4 years to solve it? Can I afford to buy it, sit on it, and wait, and probably solve it one day with a lawsuit? If I can afford to do that, then no one deal should take you down. Even 5 deals like that shouldn't take you down.
That's really good. And of course, it also comes back to what we just talked about in terms of investing in the business and making that business strong enough to be able to sustain that.
Yeah.
Really good. If someone's listening to this and they are, newer to the land space, or let's say they are new to some of this curative title work, what would be some of the most important daily actions that they need to take to move the needle in their business?
If you're looking to put this stuff on your radar and do deals like this, first thing I would say is, if you have a day job or you have a real estate business that you're running, don't stop that. Don't ever jump in and say, let me go do these and abandon what works. That's a poor choice. Keep doing what works. That pays your bills. You understand it. It's consistent. There's no reason to get away from that. But start to look at these deals on your own. Don't put a lot of money in it. But look at some of these free lead sources that I'm telling you about, especially the delinquent tax list or the tax foreclosure, so the sale list. Start looking at those. Start making a couple of calls. Say, I'm going to call 3 people every single day. It might not be a ton, but you got to get the feel for it. I would probably spend some time doing some education. I have a couple courses online. I'm not trying to pump them. They're a couple $100, and it's anywhere from 2 to 8 hours of me talking about a specific topic. They're a little bit more in depth of what kind of judgments and liens are out there, how to deal with them and negotiate them or solve them or just go around them completely, what kind of title problems actually exist, how to deal with those. I've got some of that out there. There are a couple of folks that offer information out there. I would start by digging through that and then commit and say, you know what, I'm going to buy the delinquent tax list, or I'm going to go to the docket search for free, download all 150 active lawsuits right now that the county has against property owners, and I'm going to call 3 or 4 a day. That's it. You have to start doing it. You have to make it consistent. And once you start to get in those conversations, you're going to start to hear what folks saying. You have to create a pitch. Figure out how your pitch is going to go. And if you are able to close a deal within 60 days of calling folks, figuring out what's going on and listening, you should come up with a pitch to get someone to trust you to do that deal. One person's got to give you that shot.
Right. Yeah.
And then when you do that, I would call your local lawyer, or guys like me or other guys that do this. I would call them and say, partner with me on this. It's going to get done fast. It's going to get surely done. You're going to make either an assignment fee or a split. But the most important part is you're going to get to see how a guy like me or somebody else who does this does the deal. And that's what you're going to have to take to the next deal and your next negotiation, because now you have some experience. That's where your credible talk starts to originate.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. Let me ask you, what do you consider to be the biggest challenge in the land industry right now?
Oh, that's a good question. The biggest challenge out there. I don't know. I would say for a while there, a lot of sellers were starting to get bullish because it was a seller's market, and they would see property and believe theirs was high value, and they just wouldn't come off that pricing. That was a big challenge that we faced for several years, but because we were going after the stuff that had a lot of problems, for us, it was a little easier to get over that because our response would be simple. Okay, you don't have to sell it to me, sell it to somebody else. And once we established credibility that we could do the deal, they would usually come back to us because most people won't deal with the stuff that we deal with. That hurdle hasn't been as big of a problem for us. I'm not totally sure. I don't know. That's a good question. I have to think on that one and get back to you.
Yeah, I asked a man whose business model is dealing with challenges. You're like, hey, there's no challenges to me.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good. So let me ask you this. You have done lots of different real estate transactions in several different real estate niches, from commercial to residential, land development. Based on all of that experience, what, in your opinion, is something that no one is talking about in the land industry right now that we should be talking about?
I think curative title work, I would call it a discipline in itself. And every time I tell people about this stuff, they're like blown away. They've never heard about it. And I always laugh and say, this is nuts. I've been talking about it on podcasts for years. And there's a small group of people that I know and that are in it. Otherwise, people are baffled. They look at it for a little while and then they move on to go do something else, back to flipping a house or cutting a 10-acre lot into 2 5-acre lots and trying to sell it. And they just ignore it because it's not easy. They just walk right past it. I think it's the most undervalued business model there is. There's zero competition. Once you learn how to do it, the margins are huge. I can't think of a reason why you would want to do almost anything else, with the exception of folks not wanting to have the new learning curve. That's the biggest barrier. But if you can get beyond that, oh God, man. Yeah, I'll make as much money as a lot of developers, and they're out there doing massive subdivisions, huge buildings. I'll make the same money, but I'll use a lot less. I don't have to get that large amount of debt to go do the big construction for them to make a 20% margin. I'll make the same dollars as them, but I'll do it with cash, and I'll have a multiple, I don't know, a couple 100% return instead of a little 20% return. So I'm safer. I'm more agile. I get a lot of little paydays along the way instead of one big massive one in 3 years. I think it's a win. I don't know why people don't do it more.
That's really good. And so let me ask, what is the typical, I know that every deal is probably different. Every title issue has its own timeline, but what's the average timeline that you could expect in some of these deals that you're doing? Just for example, the most common rural properties that you deal with, those types of deals, what's the timeline typically look like for that?
I ran a report. This was about 2.5 years ago when I was looking at doing some changes and reorganization in my business when it came to like administrative folks and cost sharing for overhead and whatnot. And I ran a cash conversion cycle on only the curative title stuff. And I found that at that point, my cash conversion cycle was about 9 months average.
Okay.
Now, how you would wind up with that is I'll have a deal that gets done in 2 months. That's 60 days, but I'll have another one that takes 18 months. So when you
Right.
start averaging all this crap, I ended up with about a 9 month conversion cycle. And there were several really long game deals in there. So that was wow. But when I step back and look at the the median, what I found is typically I get stuff solved. The 75% of these deals get solved in 90 days. And
Wow.
that's from experience. That's from me filtering down some deals that are not worth it to me. I won't take it. So I know that I can get the big part of these done in about 90 days. So for me, that shortens the cycle time. It increases my odds. I get paid a little bit quicker. Now, some of them that are like multi-million-dollar deals that might take me a couple of years, I'm happy to take that on. My entry price is low, 100 grand. I'll make $1 million on it. It's okay if it takes 24 months.
Yeah.
But the bulk of them, 90 to 120 days. And when I go in, I'm vetting them. After this amount of experience, I'll look at it and say, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. These are the solves. My wild card is this over here. Let me see how I can solve for that one risk item. That's it.
Yeah.
So
That's fantastic. Again, being intentional, it's it's amazing. I love it. I love it. Shifting gears a little bit, what would you consider to be your superpower?
thinking critically, cognitive score. But we did some tests. We were coming up with we had a consultant in here and we were looking at some management structuring stuff 3 or 4 months ago. And I had a pretty high cog score. What that means is you can figure things out really quickly and make a decision on it. And I won't say that's something I ever recognized for me was good, but I noticed that it's been really helpful in this business. That's been big. And then the other one is people. I'm not Mr. Charisma that walks into a room and got all the attention, that guy, but I can talk to people. I can help understand their problems. I can let them know that I'm honest. I can communicate really well what's going on and figure out how to get them on the same page with me. I can build trust really well. I'm pretty good at explaining really complicated things in a very simple way. And those are the things that I really think benefited a lot on these type of deals. So I'd say those are the two. Ultimately, a large part of my role in this company now is no longer finding things or solving problems because I've trained everybody to do that. At this point, I'm making sure partners are happy. There's no conflict among partners. I'm making sure administrative folks are getting the right career path and growth that they need. Salespeople are at the right point in their career and they're happy. They're getting the right motivation and satisfaction. I'm really looking at the people and trying to keep people in my company happy, because if I can keep them happy, the money keeps coming and I don't have to hire or fire and retrain. Get good people and hang on to them. That's what I really focused on. So the people part's been a big key there.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. What's your definition of success?
It's getting to do what you want to do, when you want to do, with the people you want to do it with.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's at this point, I'm here. The other day, someone was asking me about doing some activity. I told them, dude, I'm at my point in my career where I don't have to do that. I don't have to do something I don't want to do. And thankfully, I'm in a spot where I can live the rest of my life without any new dollars coming in. But I come here because this is fun. We have incredible people whose lives are being changed because they're growing their own companies. I'm helping mentor those guys. Some of our employees came from making 40 grand in their last job. I got guys right now on pace to make 100 grand this year, 150 grand. And their last job was a $40,000 job or 30,000. We identified good talent, brought them in, and we're helping change their life and change who they are as a person. This is fun, man. This is like a chess match now. So it's a really fun thing to be part of when I'm not worried about paying my rent next month or something. It's a project. It's fun.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
I
success to me.
love that. I love that. I love that so much. And so, continuing in that same vein, what are some of the values that you've built your company culture around?
So with that consultant group, went through this exercise, and there were core values. After we went through the long interview process, innovation was one of them. Golly, hard work. There was a word that came out of hard work, but it's basically hard work, innovation, integrity. People have to be honest. They have to do what they say they're going to do. They have to make a commitment and stick with it. The and we just implemented these, actually. They're up on the wall in there, so I don't have them memorized. But another one is basically intellect. I don't know what the word that came out in our deal is, but it's having bright people and helping those bright people continue to work with their skills. We value that. People solving problems and fixing stuff really matters, but they have to be honest with us. They have to be honest with buyers and sellers. If not, we wind up in a bunch of frivolous lawsuits. We're doing big dollars here. You got to be a good person. You got to care. Those things. We built a company of smart, hardworking, good people that care. And as a result, people have a high satisfaction. They earn a lot of money. This is a neat place because of those core values.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's really good. So, what's some of your favorite entrepreneurs or business owners? It doesn't necessarily have to be in the real estate space, but is there anyone that you really like reading about or anything like that?
Dale Carnegie has been a good one. Early on, I read his How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read that several times, and I love that. That's huge.
Yeah, for sure.
It sounds really strange, but in the last couple of years, I haven't really done a lot of reading or outward kind of stuff. I think we've got a good thing here, and we have good people here, and we've really been internally working on everything's been focused inward. There hasn't been a lot of outward stuff. So I haven't been watching the news that much. It's the things I want to do.
Bad thing.
Huh?
So that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Not watching the news, that's not a bad thing.
The things I want to do in life are, I want to come to work, I want to hang out with my family, and I want to exercise. Those are the three things I want to do. Yeah. And if it's not those three things, I've gotten it out of my life. People pretty much do all the other things in my life for me if it's not those three. So this is work. I get to do this. I'm going to play with my kids and my wife, and I'm going to work out. That's pretty much it. I haven't been doing a lot of reading, not much news. It's all inward lately.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. I admire that so much. What's the biggest surprise you've had so far on your journey in the land space?
Biggest surprise. Maybe stumbling upon this. When I was younger, folks would ask, or I would always ask folks how they got successful, what was their path, how'd they learn it. And I expected to hear like a path. Like, you're gonna be an engineer, you go to college, you do this, do these interviews, you get to be an engineer. I never heard that from entrepreneurs. So coming along this path of getting here there was this epiphany I had 3 or 4 years ago. I remember stepping back. Somebody asked me, how'd you get successful? How'd you get there? And the light went off in my head. That's the question I was asking those guys. And I had to give this guy the same fucking answer that they all gave me. I went out and I struggled. I stumbled. I took this job. I took that job. I went to work. I figured it out. And I took this weird windy path and I wound up here. And that was this huge epiphany at that moment. I realized, gosh, you got to be out there looking for it. You got to be interested. You can't be closed-minded. And you got to have a lot of, steam. You really got to be working at something. And if you're really doing all those things, you'll wind up somewhere. And to me, that was a huge epiphany and a surprise. And I stepped back and realized my path was just like theirs, unpredictable and erratic, but it landed here.
Absolutely.
So I recognized it.
And I love that you mentioned struggle too, because I think that has been one of the things that I have found in so many entrepreneurs' background is that there is always a season of struggle. And I think as human beings, we try to mitigate that as much as possible. If I'm struggling, that means it's not for me and I got to move on. But that's not really the case. That struggle is part of the journey oftentimes.
That's true. I have to say, I'm pretty fortunate as we haven't had any major setbacks along this journey. We haven't had, some folks have had to go through bankruptcy or had a big blowout with a business partner and restart. I've not had any of that stuff, but our commercial wholesaling business line fell apart at the end of last year. We had a bad work environment. We had a lot of unhappy employees. We were unhappy. The market changed. No one was making money in our company, including us, for a couple months. that was a huge setback, and we had to figure out how to navigate that. And it took us 6 months to rehire, rebuild company culture, realign a little bit different asset classes. And it was a big work project, I guess you could say. So that was a huge setback. But ultimately, we'd saved money and retained it. So we went negative for a couple months in a row, but we had all these retained earnings. We used it to pay the little losses for a couple months while we rebuilt. We got back to where we were going and we kept moving. So those are the kind of setbacks we've had, which they're not bankruptcies or losing a business partner, but fuck, working for 6 months, rebuilding a company and living off the retained earnings for a few months, that's a pretty significant thing.
Yeah, not super comfortable, not super fun.
Right.
What I love about that though is that I hear a lot of investors talk about when they hit a rough patch, a lot of times they just switch their marketing or they think, oh, just go to a different market or just I love that you like went inward and we're like, okay, we got to work on the company. We have to work on the culture of what's happening in our business, right?
Yeah, those are not things that you think about when you're building this company. You're just, the market's hot and you're making money and you're going towards it. And you hire employees that are toxic, but they're great salespeople. And you have young partners that have never run like their own company, with the exception of doing a couple of deals on their own. But they're doing the best they can, but they haven't been trained. They might not be natural at it and things are going wrong. But when your revenue covers almost all problems. So when the revenue is really good and the market's hot, all these problems aren't so important. When the revenue starts to fall, it shows all these cracks that you have in the hole. And that's when you've all really got to dig down and say, whoa, we've created a freaking monster here. Let's try to tame this beast.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really good. That's good stuff.
That's a big difference from doing deals here and there and being a deal shop, which is what I was for the first 3 or 4 years, into being an actual company. Big difference.
Yeah, deal shop versus company. That's good. I've never heard it said that way, but that's really good. That's awesome. So, if you could go back and tell yourself three pieces of advice when you were a newbie, what would they be?
The first thing would be, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Just keep doing what you're doing and you'll wind up there. That to me is massive. There's a lot of insecurity along the way. And I would ask myself, am I doing enough? Is this right? Should I do more? What even should I do this day? I didn't know. And what I found is I just kept showing up to my desk and kept trying to look for money and kept trying to find deals and kept trying to do work. And because I kept showing up and putting in a lot of time, things got the right direction. So that would be one thing. Another thing is the financial discipline. I would remind people of that. Go against your intuition. Your intuition says buy cool shit, make yourself feel good, reward yourself. Go against that. I would recommend that. Something that's mattered a lot to me is bumping into folks that were really successful and did really well. And I would try to get as close as I could to them. I'll give you an example how it worked for me. And a lot of folks always say, go find a mentor, offer your services for free. Sounds great in concept, but it's hard to just not have a job and go work for a dude for free for 5 months to learn.
Yeah.
There was an investor that I was introduced to early on. He was lending money, doing big deals. And he lent a little money to me on a private money loan. And I went and did a flip house early on. I was on the phone with him one time when I was getting ready to get him paid off. And he said he was going to Detroit. This was like 6, 7, 8 years ago. He was going to Detroit to buy 100 houses over a week's time. And they were auctioning these things off in blocks back when the economy was still just in the early recovery phases. And he told me he was doing that. And I was like, what are you doing? I just kept asking him questions. He was explaining. I was like, you're going by yourself? And he goes, yeah, my assistant had a family emergency. He can't go. I said, I got a deal, Joe. I'm going to buy my plane ticket. I'm going to go with you and I'll be your assistant. I just want to go for the ride. So I went to Detroit for a week and played his secretary with the iPad, making calls, driving while he was doing stuff. And it was one of the most educating experiences of my life. And it only took a week of time, but I also built a relationship with him that I still have closely to this day. The dude has taught me so much, but I got to build a relationship and learn a shit ton along the way. It was incredible.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So find those people, seek them out, get their knowledge, do whatever you can to help them. Be nice, help them, like be there for them. And if you are, you'd be surprised what you pick up.
That's good. That's really good. So, what's your biggest passion or goal you'd like to achieve at this point in your life?
Biggest passion. Guy, you should have sent me these so I could ponder them. Some of these are some good ones. I don't know. It's a good point. The stuff that I focus on that I want to continue the same direction are raising my kids in a way that they're stable, happy, successful people that have the ability to go out and do what they want in life, not necessarily what they have to do, but what they want to do. I want that. I want to keep the relationship with my wife going well. When you're raising 4 kids, I have 4 of them, by the way.
Congrats.
Time can get split, and the connection between husband and wife can be weak because you got all these kids you're juggling and business and all that. So I want to keep working on that. And a company like this, I don't have a revenue goal or a net worth goal. I've far exceeded any of those goals I ever thought I would ever get to. So at this point, I'm just in the pay zone. We're working, we're making money, we're growing as much as we can. I don't know the best answer, but I'd like to keep improving on all those.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's great. That's great. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Listen, Logan, I want to thank you so much. You've been so generous and you've given us so much today. How can we give back to you right now? What are you looking for in terms of resources or connections that we could potentially help you with?
I enjoy working with folks. This is what I do. This is a chess match at this point. It's really exciting getting complicated deals, getting folks to make money, us doing it. When folks come across these kind of deals, I'd encourage you to share them with me or some guys in my office. I won't say that I do this because I want to get JV deals, but it inherently comes out of that. There are folks right now in this that have deals that have fallen apart, and there might be a way to piece them back together. I'd encourage you to reach out to folks in my office. I can make money on them with you while you're making money, and we both learn a little bit along the way. And that's a great way. Maybe participate in some of the stuff. We do some small events. We'll do a webinar that's on a particular topic. Sometimes I'll do in-person stuff. Maybe once or twice a year, I'll do a curative title workshop, things like that. I'd encourage you to get involved in that stuff because the community helps grow. And ultimately, we all make a little more money when that happens because of your relationships. So I'd maybe ask for some of that back.
Yeah, no, I love it. And if people want to get in touch with you, if they've got a deal that they want to JV with you, they want to learn more about what you do, they want to take some courses, how can they go about finding you?
I just sent the email address in the group chat, office@arpusa.com. That doesn't go directly to me, but I got, let's see, Logan, Bill, Dave, Kyle, Ron. Okay, I got 5 partners in the office, me and 4 others. That email address goes to the team. So someone will answer that if you got some wacky question about a deal. Sometimes we just offer guidance, but if it's something that you want to work with us on, send it into that, will help. I got a ton of stuff out there on Facebook and Instagram. So if you type in Logan Fullmer, you'll find one of those 2 accounts.
Excellent.
Easy to get to.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much again, Logan. This has been absolutely incredible. Logan, you're amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. This has just been a masterclass in actual curative title research and work, and this has been awesome. So go check out Logan. He's got some incredible resources for you as well. And until then, be great, have a good one, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other 6- and 7-figure land flippers about how they've built and run their businesses, then check out my group, OnlyLandFans, where I do a live interview each week inside the group. You can grab that link at the description below. Until then, be great, have a great week, and catch you in the next one.